There's a bunch of different ways of doing E1M8. There's a bunch of different stuff that's been found, and I'll cover a bunch of demos, but I'll begin with this one. This is 46 seconds by a UV speed, not UV max or anything. 46 seconds by Sedlo, set back in 2004. This isn't a TAS, this is just a regular old human run. And yeah, this does the level in the intended way, which is to come up here, kill these two barons. After the barons are dead, look, I'm pretty sure everyone knows how this map goes at this point, but since we're here, after you kill the two barons, all the walls surrounding this area are going to lower, afterwards you can access a switch, which raises some stairs. You climb those stairs, you get to a teleporter, that teleporter takes you to the final room. In that final room you take a bunch of floor damage, and it's also filled with enemies that will kill you probably before the floor damage will. And then as soon as your health is under 10%, the map automatically ends. So what you're meant to do is you're meant to jump over here, hit this switch, stairs are meant to raise here, and you climb up here, you get to this teleporter, so on and so forth. There's a trick we can do though to save a bit of time, and which Sadlo does here. You just jump straight across that gap. Takes a bit of timing, it's not too precise really, and now we can just head straight to this teleporter. Now Sedlo already has 3% health, which is lower than 10, which means as soon as he exits, as soon as he enters this teleporter and gets to the final room, on the very first frame he's in that final room, the level's just going to end. Because it's like, oh, okay, well, we're already under 10% health, time for the map to end. So I'll show you something quickly. So the final room is actually located over here, so outside the map. So here is where we fought the barons, here's the teleporter, and here is the final room. And as I mentioned, yeah, as soon as Sedlo takes this teleporter, he's going to go to that final room, because he's already on 3% health, he's going to the level's going to end immediately, so yeah, beauty. Not much else to it other than that. There's not really many ways you can speed this up. You have to get that jump, really, that's sort of a non-negotiable. Other than that, it pretty much just comes down to missing as few shots as possible and rolling the dice on good damage rolls, and seeing how, you know, how much the game just decides to do you a solid on any particular run. So 46 seconds, that's quite a bit slower than a lot of the tricks we have found since then, and I'll go over a few of those now. So the first major real revolutionary skip or trick to happen in this map was the Pinky Glide, and that's shown in this demo here. This is a 19.03 second UV speed demo by 4-Shock Blast. This isn't a TAS, this is just a regular old human run, and here I'm letting it play out in its entirety, and then I'll go back and explain a couple of things. So instead of fighting the barons, you run into that side room, you pop yourself out of the map, you run into a certain spot in the void, and the map just mysteriously ends. Okay, so there's two parts of this map. The first one is this void glide, where you are here 1 second and you are no longer there the next. And the second major thing to discuss really is the fact that the map ends as soon as you just run north enough outside of the map. What's going on here? Okay, well, I'm going to be annoying and make you think about numbers for a little while, so I'm going to open up X-Ray and I'll explain some stuff about momentum values and diagonal walls. This is X-Ray. This is the program that we use to create fully built tool-assisted speedruns, so all of that completely frame-by-frame stuff, but it's also really, really handy as a tool to use to examine demos because it gives us heaps of information for every single frame. In particular, there's this player movement stuff, so this lets us know our position all the time, how much distance we've traveled on any given frame, and here's the important stuff that we're going to look at today, so our momentum value. X momentum, how our speed traveling either east or west, with a positive value being east, and Y momentum, how fast we are traveling north or south, with a positive value being north. So this is obviously no longer E1M8, this is Doom 2 Map 1, but this is a convenient way to show you a couple of things. So first of all, I'm just going to run forward. Yeah, why not? We'll just play Doom 2 for a while. And there's a wall ahead of us. But as we are approaching the wall, if you pay attention to the Y momentum value, you can see that it's continuing to raise. So remember, positive Y momentum equals we are traveling to the north. So that's continuing to raise. Oh dear, looks like we're going to crash into this wall. And oh no, we've hit the wall. Okay, so our Y momentum value, back here, it was 15 units per frame. And as soon as we hit it, we lose all of that Y momentum and it's back down to 0. So this is what generally happens when we run into walls. We lose most, if not all, of our momentum value, unless we do stuff with, momentum preservation tricks, but then by definition, they're kind of an exception to this rule. Something different happens if you run into enemies or things like map decorations, like torches and stuff like that. So instead of running into that wall up ahead, I'm just going to run into this zombie guy. So you can see, once again, our Y momentum value is continuing to climb, and we are going to collide with this enemy. And you can see that our Y distance value has dropped back down to 0, which means we are not traveling north at all. We're not actually moving north, but you can see that our Y momentum value is continuing to climb. So our speed is accumulating even though we're not moving any further to the north. So we can just run into any enemies we want, and speed is just going to keep on building, which means as soon as this enemy is out of the way and we're in a position where we can continue to travel to the north, we will have already had accumulated quite a bit of northern momentum, which means we can just move forward very, very quickly. We don't need to start running again from a very low momentum value. It's already built up to a fairly high speed. So, play it a bit faster. As soon as the guy moves out of the way, we could just fire straight through. Now, this is very different to what happens with walls, and it's very much worth distinguishing the two. That's the main reason I'm showing you this, really. Running into walls pretty much always kills all your momentum. Running into enemies lets you keep a lot of your momentum. Very important distinction. All right. Now, with that being said, let's go back to E1M8. So we're back in E1M8, and the next thing to cover is the difference between diagonal walls and straight walls, and how the game deals with them. So if you've got a straight wall, one that's perfectly north, east, south, or west, if you run into that wall, then, as I mentioned before, it's pretty much going to kill most, if not all, of your momentum value. If you run alongside the wall, however, nothing much special is going to happen to your momentum value. So you can get a wall run effect if you happen to be traveling east or north under correct circumstances. And in a wall run, the distance you move per frame doubles relative to your momentum value. Now, it's important to distinguish the distance moved value from the momentum value. The momentum value itself does not increase. It is the distance traveled value that doubles. Now, that's what happens with axis-aligned walls, so walls that are perfectly north, east, straight, south, or west. Now, it's a bit different with diagonal walls. So this diagonal wall, for example, which is about to become very important. When you run into diagonal walls, it's a lot more messy. The game tends to freak out a lot more. So a similar thing can happen, and generally does happen, where if you run into a diagonal wall, typically you're just going to lose most, if not all, of your momentum. It can also, you can end up with an elastic collision effect, where it takes a lot of your momentum and actually redirects that in a completely different direction. So it'll just bounce you back the way you've just come, which can be fairly annoying. It can also give you a massive distance traveled increase while killing your speed, or a massive distance traveled increase while keeping you at the same speed, or it can keep you in the same spot while not affecting your speed, or it can keep you in the same spot while giving you a massive speed increase. And it's that massive speed increase which is the outcome we really want. By running into diagonal walls, if you get lucky, the game, as part of its freaking out, can sometimes just give you a whole bunch of extra momentum, and you can end up with a very, very high momentum value. Now, crucially, you can end up with a momentum value that is much higher than you can achieve by doing anything else in the game. That includes damage boosts from enemies, rocket boosts from your own rockets, explosions from barrels, or anything like that. So by running into diagonal walls in the correct way, we can accumulate a whole bunch of extra momentum, and we're going to take advantage of that effect to get into this position and then be traveling so fast that we end up traveling through the wall. So, as I showed before, we're going to run here, we're going to get blocked by this pinky, and then we're just going to pop straight through the wall there. Whoop. The game doesn't like it when you rewind when you're in the third person camera mode. Okay, so this green arrow here is full shock blast, and this red arrow is the pinky. And what's going to happen is we're going to wedge ourselves right here between this diagonal wall and between the pinky. So remember in Doom 2 map 1, that X-ray thing I was showing you just before, I was saying that if you run into enemies, you actually maintain the same amount of momentum. Your momentum value doesn't die when you run into enemies. So by wedging yourself between this diagonal wall and the enemy, you get two effects that happen at the same time. Because you're running into the enemy, your momentum value does not lower, and if you get lucky, you're also running into this diagonal wall in such a way that the game freaks out and gives you a whole bunch of extra speed. So what's going to happen here is we're going to be, as far as the game is concerned, we're going to be running against this diagonal wall. The math there, it goes, oh hey, what the hell do we do? Let's just give Foreshock a whole bunch of extra momentum. But then we don't actually move because this pinky's keeping us in place, and we don't lose any of our speed because we're running into the pinky. So then, okay, next frame. We just do the same thing again, basically. As far as the game is concerned, we just run into this diagonal wall. We get a whole bunch of extra speed, run into it again and again, and this creates kind of like a bit of a feedback loop where this just happens frame after frame after frame. We're staying in the same position, but we're just sort of running into this diagonal wall over and over and over. Well, that's probably the best way of explaining it anyway. And each time we do, we end up with just a bit more momentum every single time. So then eventually we end up with so much momentum that we're on this side of the wall one frame, and then we pop straight through the wall on the next frame. So we're back to, yeah. You can see our momentum value gets very, 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 very fast and ends up, I paused it at the wrong time, but you might have seen it was 32 there. So we end up fast enough where we can run just straight through the wall. And that's how the void glide occurs. We take advantage of a couple of little quirks of the game engine to put ourselves in a position where we can gather so much speed that we can just pop ourselves straight through the wall. And here, of course, we're out of bounds and we can just run straight around the map. And then the next little mystery presents itself to us, which is, okay, why does the map just end when we get north enough? We're not even in that final room. What's happening here? Okay, so I'll explain that one next. Alright, we're not playing a demo anymore. This is just me playing normally, and I'm going to try to explain something. Now, it's pretty annoying to wrap your head around. It's very annoying to wrap your head around when you're actually trying to take advantage of it by making a TAS or anything, but here we go. Okay, right now I'm inside the map, right? Now with the press of a button, I've turned on no clipping. Now I'm turning off no clipping again, so now I do have collision again, and I'm in the void. Now I obviously didn't do any trick to get myself here, I just no clipped my way through here. Okay, so I can't run back through the wall to get back into the map. I'm just now stuck outside the map. Okay. Now, out here in the map, there's no geometry, there's no walls, there's no floors, there's definitely no things like barrels or enemies or anything like that. So out here, well, how does it know what my height is meant to be? And why does my height change when I drop down here? And why can't I travel any further this way? Okay, well, and why can't I travel back up here? Okay, I'll just pop myself back over here. The structures of the map and the effects of those structures of the map continue past the map and into the void. And I'll show you an example of this. So right now I'm in the map, and normally if you're going to, let's say you're in the map, right? You want to play the map normally, so you'd hit this switch and this wall would lower and then you'd be able to keep running. Okay, no worries. Now I'm going to pop myself back out of the map. If I try running forward here, this wall is actually going to block me. This wall doesn't exist in the void. There's nothing here. You can't see anything, right? But this effect of this wall, where it actually blocks the player, persists permanently to the south. So if I just keep traveling south, I can't move past this point because this wall's in the way. Now I'm going to pop myself back in the map. Now I've pressed the switch. Now I'm going to pop myself back out of the map. Now when I try running into it again, I can just run straight through. Now the wall has lowered, which means that wall effect does not keep persisting permanently south into the map, which means there's nothing to run into, you know? That obstruction is now gone. So the geometry of the map that is inside the bounds of the map, the effects of that geometry continue into the void next to that relevant part of the map. Now, I know that's probably explained quite poorly, but I really don't know how to do a better job, to tell you the truth. So I'll turn off clipping again. So you'll remember from the start of this video that this final room, hang on, this final room is here. So now if I run here, I'm just going to start taking damage. Oh crap, now if I jump back out of the room, oh okay, no worries. Now, the effect of this room, the damaging floor effect, is actually also just going to keep on continuing off permanently to the east. So I don't need to be inside the room to take damage. I can just be next to the room to take damage, because that damaging floor effect just keeps on continuing permanently to the east. So I'll jump back into the map again. So that means that we don't need to be in that final room to take the damage and have the exit floor effect thing. All we need to do is be in the void next to the room. So by doing that void glide trick that Shock did, you know, you run all the way around here outside the map, and all you need to do is just end up next to this room somewhere. And because the effect of that room persists past the bounds of the room, just permanently east into the void, all you need to do is just be in some certain part of the void and it pops you out. Now it's very difficult behavior to try to navigate because you can't check out a map editor to work out where any of the boundaries are, and you can't see anything in the void. So the only way to really work out where you are and where the barriers are and the floor heights and everything like that is to just run around and use X-ray and be constantly monitoring your coordinates. It's very frustrating and difficult to navigate. But that's basically, in a nutshell, that's how that works. You can just be anywhere in the void to the east of that room, and you'll keep taking damage, and then you'll just exit the map that way. So yeah, by using the pinky glide and taking damage just by being in the right part of the void, it just exits the map that way. Cool, okay, so that pretty much wraps that one up. I'll show you something else next. For the longest time, the only way to actually beat the map was to, you know, either complete it normally by killing the two barons, or to do the void glide trick by using that pinky, which means that completing E1M8 with no monsters in the no-mo category was just impossible to do. Just couldn't be done. This is a Zero Master demo. Big shock. Zero Master found something that broke the game. I know you're all stunned. He gets himself into a very precise position where he is able to run into a certain corner and pop himself through a wall and end up in that massive outside area at the end of the map. From there, he can just run to the final switch, raise those stairs, and get to the final teleporter. So at the minute, he found a very precise setup for this. When he actually recorded this demo, he didn't have access to any of these coordinate values or anything like that. He needed to do all of this stuff just by looking at visual cues of the geometry of the blocks and everything like that. So gets himself into this very precise position, pops himself straight out here. So if you don't do this, you're stuck in this room, and there's no way to lower these walls because the barons don't exist, and the only way to lower the walls is for the barons to die. The walls lowering don't depend on the absence of living barons, they depend on the death of the two barons. So then you go through the very slow process of waiting for these stairs to raise. This, by the way, you'll recall that Sedlow jumped straight across. This is why Sedlow did that, because waiting for these stairs to raise is very slow. And then you're in the final room, you take all this damage, and too easy. You exit the map. Now this was very significant when Zero Master found this and posted this demo. This was the first No Monsters demo of E1M8, and just showed a really, really cool proof of concept, frankly. So there's an elephant in the room, though this is pretty slow. It's amazing, but it's pretty slow. So the natural next step was to just YOLO it straight into that corner. And there was a bunch of regular human demos that did that, but now I'm going to show you the first actual TAS of this video. So this is 21.97 seconds by Demon12321, a really good TASer you should check out. And he just, no setup needed, just runs himself straight into that corner, gets the void glide, hits the switch. Unfortunately, no way to speed up the stairs raising. And yeah, too easy. Now this is a really cool trick, right? And definitely opens up some possibilities for Nomo. But you'll notice that even from a really good TAS like Demon's made here, this is 21 seconds, whereas 4Shot got 19 seconds non-TAS with an older strategy by using that Pinky Glide. So for UV speed runs, I mean this is cool, but it actually ends up being fairly useless for UV speed because we already had previously existing strategies that were superior. But something else happened, and I'll show you that next. So this is the corner that Zero Master found that trick worked in. And I'm not going to waste everyone's time by trying to get the trick while we're recording this video right now, but basically by turning on no clipping, I'll show you what he did was, you know, he got that really cool setup and he just popped himself straight through there. And then he ended up out here. Awesome. Okay. So what another player called Rocky4725 found was, well, how about instead of going this way, why don't we just use the same corner but instead go that way? And instead of ending up in a different part of the map, just end up in the void over here. And this is a really, really cool discovery for a couple of reasons. So first of all, it's faster for no monsters because, you know, you don't need to go around here and hit that switch and wait for those steps to raise. You can just run around, you know, as if we'd just done the Pinky Glide and get to the right part of the void and get the damage exit that way. But also, this is faster than the Pinky Glide. You don't need to wait for the Pinky to get into the right position. So this is viable for UV speed and no monsters, and it's the fastest method for both categories, which is really, really cool. It pretty much just changed everything. So yeah, I'll show you some more stuff, more demos using this in a second. Using that new void glide that I just mentioned that Rocky found, he and I went back and forth on a few tool assisted demos that we sort of outdid each other a couple of times, but we couldn't quite break into the 13-second barrier. Eventually we worked together and we managed to get 13.94 seconds. So I'll play that demo now. It's fairly short, so I'll just play it out in its entirety, and then I'll go back and I'll explain a few optimizations that we did, because there's about half a dozen things that you really don't notice until they're explained. So beauty, 13.94. Now we were pretty bloody thrilled about this when we got it, because it took us quite a lot of effort to shave those last couple of frames off. So okay, first thing, Rocky found that if you stay on this top step for a little bit longer, you can end up with a higher northern momentum value by the time you step off this first step. Now, because you can't actually change your momentum value while you're in midair, only things like colliding with walls and getting shot and everything like that can change your momentum while you're midair. Getting the highest amount of momentum prior to leaving the ground is very, very important. So by getting a little bit more momentum, he was able to get to this first door a bit faster. I think that saved 2 frames over our previous best. So we shot this barrel to not only massively reduce our health, so you know as soon as we hit the right part of the void we have low enough health so the map exits instantly, but also so it just flings us down, like just throws us down these stairs at a really, really high speed. So then we open this door, we back up, two things happen here. As we run through here, we wall run along this little bit, which just saves, you know, 2 frames or so. But then we turn back around and we close that door. Now that's very important. I'll get back to that in a sec. Okay. We run over here. We get this wall run against here. Then we come over here. We get like a weird elastic collision thing and then immediately start gathering a whole bunch of momentum into this direction. And then we get the void glide, pops us straight through out into the void. Okay. Now, a little bit earlier, you'll remember I said that the effects of walls and map geometry and everything like that persists permanently into the void. So by closing this door, we now actually have a permanently solid object that travels permanently to the east in this direction. Now this means we're actually able to wall run against that. If we did not turn around and close this door, there'd be nothing to run into. We'd just, not run into anything. And well, eventually we'd hit some other kind of obstruction, but that'd be fairly useless. Basically, by closing that door, we gave ourselves a very valuable surface to wall run against to cover a lot of valuable extra distance. So I'll put the auto map on. I'll lower the speed a little bit. You can see we get down to about here and then wall run really, really quickly before traveling up this way. Now this ends up actually saving time compared to just staying close to the wall here. Believe me, we tested both. And yeah, wall running against there and leaving the wall at the exact frame that we left it and intercepting the wall on the exact frame that we intercepted it ended up being optimal. So then we get up to this bit and we wall run against this diagonal wall here. Now, diagonal wall running functions differently to regular wall running, but it gets even worse than that because wall running on a wall, the behavior changes depending on whether you're inside the map or outside the map. So when you're outside the map, running into a wall cannot lower your momentum value, but you also cannot get that cool effect where diagonal wall running gives you a whole bunch of extra momentum. Basically, we can only get the effect where our momentum occasionally doubles, except for reasons that I've just now decided there's no real need to get into. This basically, we end up just bumping against the wall over and over. We're not traveling perfectly diagonally, we kind of just get like a long chain of bumps over and over, and each bump gives us a bit of extra momentum. So by wall running against this diagonal wall, we save a bit of crucial extra time, get to the end of it, travel north and get to the right part of the void, take some damage, and exit the map that way. 13.94 seconds. Okay, so there's a completely different trick that we'll now cover. This is the end of a full episode 1 tool assisted speedrun, UV speed, by Zero Master. And there's something very special that happens at the end of this E1M8. He does the no monsters glide, but he doesn't go over to that switch to climb the stairs, he just does that. Something completely different. Now, it's a void glide, like we've seen before, except it's a very special void glide for a couple of reasons. Okay, so there's no corner to wedge yourself into. So if you have a corner that's something like this one, or E2M6, which I won't get too much into now, but it's very similar. If you actually get wedged into a corner here, you don't need another pinky to trap yourself. You can just keep on building up speed over and over on this, diagonal wall and pop yourself through that way. But this isn't a corner like that. If he tries running, northwest up here, he's just going to hit this wall and just eventually keep traveling west. So there's no way he can get stuck, right? Okay, so what he does is he actually rocket boosts himself roughly here and puts himself very close to this wall here with a very, very high momentum value. But just by a rocket boosting alone, you don't have enough momentum to actually pass through walls. Rocket boosts do not give you enough speed to perform void glides. For that, you need diagonal wall runs. So what he does is he rocket boosts himself into a very precise position with a very high momentum value and then gets a single frame of diagonal wall running after that is high enough to pop himself through. He doesn't need an enemy to block himself. He doesn't need a corner where he can actually get stuck. He doesn't even need to stop. There isn't a single frame where he's stationary. He just pops straight through. And of course then he's right here next to the exit sector. So you don't need to mess around with popping yourself out here, then going all the way to the right and then going all the way up or whatever. You can just pretty much keep traveling straight up the whole time. It's a much more direct way to go. And he ends up completing the level in 11.23 seconds, which is, about 2.7 seconds faster than Rocky and I managed in that other run that we just did. There's a problem with this though. There is no rocket launcher in E1M8, so you can do this trick in a full episode run, but you can't do this trick in a single individual level run. And there's no monsters out here, so you can't do like the pinky glide out here. So it seems like the trick should be impossible, and for a while I thought that it was. Eventually though, I found a way to do this without a rocket launcher even, and I'll play that demo now. So this demo is a couple of days old. This is 10.74 seconds by myself and Rocky. The first 3 seconds were done by Rocky. And well, I found out this is much simpler. Well, it looks much simpler than it is, but you can just pop yourself straight through this corner that Zero Master rocket boosted himself through, just by building up enough speed from diagonal wall running to pop yourself straight through. Now I'm going to actually open up X-Ray to go through this a bit more in depth, because this is more complicated and difficult than it looks, so I'll just set that up. We are back in X-Ray at the minute, and I have opened the 10.74 second UV speedrun that I played just before. So mostly I'm just going to skip through a bunch of stuff up until we get up to the final void glide to exit the map. A lot of this stuff I do find fairly interesting, particularly this void glide here, but we're just going to skip over that and get up to here, because this is the main thing I want to talk about, because I'm still kind of buzzing about this working. So you can see all of my inputs in this massive list over here. Pretty much the main thing I'm manipulating through all of these inputs is just the turning values. So TL1 means you're turning to the left 1 turning angle. TR19 means you're turning to the right 19 turning angle, so on and so forth. So this MF45 SR41, just ignore that. That's running and strafing, but that's the only time I change that. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so once again, if you watch that Y momentum value, you can see that on the massive run up towards this corner, it pretty much levels out. It reaches a point where it hits equilibrium basically, and then as I do all this weird stuff against the diagonal wall, you can see it starts shooting all over the place, and then here you can see that I've popped through the wall. Okay, so when I said that sometimes in very rare and fortunate circumstances your interactions with diagonal walls can result in a massive momentum increase, it is very rare and it is very fortunate that it happens, and I wanted to pretty much just showcase the volatility of that in X-Ray here. So on this frame, which I'll put a U on the list, you can see that my Y momentum value went from 23.6 on the frame before that to 29 on the frame after that. That's a very dramatic bump. And I just wanted to basically show how volatile this is. So I'm just going to start picking random turning values. I'm just going to turn left and just watch how much that Y momentum value changes. It's all over the place. And I'll get back to, what was it? Yeah, -3. So then if I start turning to the right, you can start seeing that again, it's just all over the place. And sometimes I get a whole lot of distance traveled, but my momentum dies, or it's just absolutely all over the place. It's just ridiculous, right? So then if I go back here and I just move this angle just by 1, or I'll go the other way, then you can see that once again the behavior is completely different. Now by turning, absolutely nothing really seems to happen. But just by making this slight difference on the frame before this one, now all of this diagonal wall running behavior is just completely just crazy basically. So getting a really good diagonal wall run on this frame doesn't just depend on being on the right angle on this frame, it depends on all of this other stuff going right. I've got to set up the right position with all of this stuff in order to just get any kind of favorable diagonal wall run at all. And then I've got to keep on going forward until over here I get another, not as dramatic a diagonal wall run, but you can see I go from a Y momentum of 25 to now about 28.2. And then I get one more boost when I actually pass into the void here. Now, what makes this really particularly frustrating is that you need very precise inputs in order to get a massive speed boost from diagonal wall running at all, except for this void glide to work instantly. On the frame right before the void glide happens, you also need to be very, very close to the wall. So you've somehow got to sort out all of your inputs, so not only do you have heaps and heaps of speed, but you also get in a really, really precise position, so this wall run happens instantly. Because if this is just off by a little bit, I've just changed that turning angle by 1. Instead, I don't get the proper diagonal wall run, I just collide with the wall, and I've lost all my momentum, and now there's no way that I can get wedged in this corner here and start building it up again. So all of this is really difficult to do. This could, I don't see why this couldn't happen with SR40 running. So at the minute I'm doing turns on SR50, which is only TAS viable, but that's really not the determining factor that makes this possible. But all of this really rapid and precise turning and everything like that really is just TAS exclusive. Like, there is no way to control this outside of pretty much brute forcing really favorable outcomes in X-Ray. So yeah, I had a swing at doing this quite a few times over the last few months, and I just failed every single time. And I knew that really it had to theoretically be possible, but I just didn't quite manage it because it's really, really, really hard to do. And eventually I just got lucky with it. It was just luck straight up really that let me through. And yeah, managed to get that void glide without a rocket boost or anything. So yeah, okay. Last thing for this map, there is the Intercepts overflow trick, or the all ghosts trick. And I'm going to discuss that next, and why, as much as I believe it's an awesome trick, it's not really the silver bullet that you probably think it is. Okay, so I'm not playing back a demo, I'm just in E1M8, and I'm going to first start talking about the Intercepts overflow trick, or the all ghosts bug, by defining what it is not. It is not just regularly no clipping, turning on ID clip or ID SPI, SPOPD. So with the press of a button in DSDA Doom, I can turn on no clipping, I can put myself out of bounds, so you can quite clearly see no clipping is activated, okay? But none of these enemies are able to run through the barrels. I can, these enemies cannot. Okay, this is completely different to the no ghosts trick, to the all ghosts trick rather. Okay, so I'll play Zero Master's demo where he got the bug, and you can see that if I just turn on ID clip, you know, none of these bad guys can start walking through the barrel, but well, check this out. Now they can all just not only run through the barrel, but completely run through all the walls as well. So collision has not just been turned off for the player, but it's also been turned off for absolutely everything. The game's ability to detect collision at all, basically, has just completely thrown its hands up and has stopped working. Now, I'm not going to completely butcher an explanation of the bug. I'm going to put a video link in the description to Decino's explanation of it. A couple of important things to note about it, however. The game still tracks sector height. So this big star, this is technically just a really high floor. It's, imagine just like a really, really tall step. So you cannot actually pass through this when the all ghosts bug is active, because the game considers this to be you trying to step up onto a really, really tall step that's way too tall for you to climb. So you can only climb up to 24 unit high stairs. This clearly is more than 24 units, so you cannot get through here. Okay, ignoring that little triviality, the bug still basically, yeah, it turns off collision, so you can just start running through walls, so you can just start running all the way over here, and you can just get yourself all the way to this end room. Now here, I should point out that the most effective thing to do is get to the room itself, because this way enemies can damage you as well as the floor damage. So you don't just want to be next to this room so you start taking floor damage, you want to also have the enemies damage you. Now hit scan attacks don't hurt you, but the melee damage of the enemies does. So this seems like it should just be like a complete slam dunk. This seems like it should obviously be the fastest way to go to beat the level as quickly as possible. I don't believe that's the case, and it's very possible that Zero Master is going to have me eating my own words on that one by pulling something else off in the future. But as much as I think this is just an awesome trick, I don't believe that it is technically the fastest way to go, and here is why. Okay, so the trick takes a little while to activate at first. go watch Casino's video if you haven't already, but it relies on the player being in an incredibly precise position and firing a shot and having very precise things happening here. Basically, enemies need to move in the exact right spot for the trick to actually work. So this takes time to happen, and it can't really effectively be manipulated through our means of RNG manipulation. This is a comp level 3 demo, meaning it's an Ultimate Doom demo, meaning that RNG seed manipulation through X-ray is not possible. That's only possible in comp level 9 or comp level 11, or 21 too, I would imagine. But we start the level every single time with the same RNG number, which means we can't just reload into the map over and over and over expecting like a different result or whatever. Yeah, we could start shooting on different frames and everything like that, but that itself is way harder than it seems. Takes a lot more fiddling than you'd probably think, and after a lot of time spent trying to pull it off, it just doesn't really seem to want to happen very quickly. So in that 10.74 second demo, you're able to begin running straight away. You're able to shoot this barrel, so it gives you a massive boost straight away. It reduces your health, so you're able to exit the level as soon as you hit that exit sector straight away. Here, you need to spend a bunch of valuable time actually activating the bug. And that just takes too much time to be viable. So the perfect way to go would probably be you start the map, you start running this way, you shoot these barrels, they explode, they fling you this way, they take a lot of your health, and after that barrel explosion, then you fire back towards the pinkies and actually activate the Intercepts overflow bug, because that way you're traveling in this direction, you have heaps of speed, the bug is active so you can just pass through the walls, and your health is low enough that the map will wrap it up very, very quickly as soon as you get to that final area. But as it exists at the minute, there's just no way to actually activate the bug quick enough for this to be the fastest possible method. As far as I'm aware, again, Zero Master's probably going to just make me eat my words on that one. But yeah, another thing is you don't really have any surfaces to wall run against as you're approaching the final area. And this is both a deficiency of this method and also a point that I'd like to make for the 10.74 second demo that doesn't have the Intercepts overflow trick. There's a big problem with that demo, and frankly, amending it just seems like an absolute nightmare. Working out exactly where to intercept this wall to begin diagonally wall running towards this corner is just going to be an absolute nightmare of trial and error. Because in order to reach this wall sooner, you need to take more of an eastern angle to approach the wall, which means you have less northern momentum, which also means, of course, you travel less distance to the north. But that will, theoretically balance out by being able to get these really cool diagonal wall running boosts quicker. But knowing exactly where the perfect point to do that is just impossible to know. Like, obviously, you wouldn't start it all the way back here. That's, way too far away. And it's too late to start it all the way up in this corner, so it's somewhere along this point. Now, the problem with that is there is no real way to know where along this point is optimal without manually trying every single one. Brute forcing cannot determine that for you. And by trying every single one, it means you also have to go through the process of, colliding with the wall and then working out all of that diagonal wall running stuff. Which is a massive manual process in itself. And you would just need to do that dozens of times and compare the outcomes each time in order to determine when the perfect time to interact with the wall is. So that just seems like a nightmare that I'm not ready to approach yet. But yeah, anyway, going back to the Intercepts overflow trick. In its current iteration, activating the trick from where it is, it just seems to be too slow to actually beat the other currently known methods that we have, which is unfortunate because, for example, in Plutonia map 11, it quite simply is. It's just a stunning improvement. It went from 30 something seconds down to 3 or 4. It's a ridiculously good improvement, but here it just doesn't seem to quite cut it. So Yeah, I think that just about wraps it up for E1M8. That's a bunch of different things that have been found for the map, a bunch of different tricks and approaches and everything. And yeah, I hope you found this interesting. If I think of anything else, I'll either leave a comment and pin it, or I'll cobble something to the end of this video before I post it. But yeah, anyway, if you have any questions, just let me know, and thanks for watching. Okay, one more thing that I forgot to mention. The final room, how it damages you regularly, and then it exits, you exit the map after you get to a low enough health. Okay, something interesting about this. So the damage effect happens only once every 32 frames, but it checking if you have low enough health happens every single frame. So once you reach the final sector, once you reach that final room or the right part in the void, if you have over 10 health, you're going to need to wait between 0 and 32 frames to then be damaged again. But if you already have low enough health to exit the map immediately, then you will exit the map immediately on the very first frame that you get into the right position. So yeah, that's a very important distinction. You get damaged every 32 frames, but then the game checks if your health is low enough every single frame. So yeah, anyway, just thought that was a worth mentioning.